What's up, Fire Pro people? This is Jelly Skeleton coming at you with a segment that I would like to use for my channel that's called Wrestling and Real Talk. And you guys might know me as that goofy guy who created the Butt Munch, but, I don't just talk out of my ass all the time. I actually have things to say, and so what I'm going to talk about is depression and the way that it affects various people. And if you'll bear with me until the end, you will hopefully be enlightened on some things about society that maybe you might not have seen, that will lead you to being able to feel better about any particular thing you might be feeling inadequate about, whether you have depression or not. So please bear with me, because this is going to be a long line of logic, but it is overall something that I think that if people would be willing to hear could be very helpful for a lot of us. So, just keep an open mind. And so here we go. And I'm going to talk about first, you're going to see a new character on the bottom right here, and his name is Prophet Gray. And I'm going to go into him a little bit later, because he is relevant in what I'm talking about. So just keep your eye on him. So first thing I'm going to talk about is the negative impacts that it can have on people, regardless of circumstance, right? So in the year 2012, the year 2012, the world ended. In the early 2010s, there was a popular trend that was started by the angry video game nerd, what was known as the caustic critic, which was a type of reviewer of usually retro media that would play up the flaws in it for laughs. I'm sure there's many of you out there who are familiar with the angry video game nerd. And there was a contemporary of the angry video game nerd, and his name was Noah Antweiler, and he had a show called The Spoonie Experiment. And in my opinion, Noah Antweiler, out of all the people who were pioneering that type of, content back at that time, was the best one. He was my favorite. And he was a man that I saw as someone that I wanted to look up to, someone that I could strive to be, like him. And the reason is because I'm, you guys know me as the guy who made the fourth wall breaker and the Butt Munch. But really, I'm a cynical asshole, right? And so is he. And his content was reflective of this, but he always framed it in a way that was funny and entertaining and made it hard to disagree with. And the thing is cynicism sometimes is warranted, and the reason is because if we're okay with accepting things as they are when they're inadequate, when our quality of life is not what it should be, well then our accepting of that fact means that will only continue. So anyways, this man, had a pretty decent life. He had a significant following for the time on the internet. He had a decent, money he made off of it, beautiful girlfriend, nice house with nice things. But due to a series of unfortunate circumstances in his life, some of which were his fault, some of which were not. No human being is perfect, and this man's level of quality as a human being is not the point of me bringing him up. But the point of me bringing him up is that due to these factors, he backslid in his depression, because this man has bipolar depression, which is just a different way in which depression manifests for certain individuals. And that is something that I have been afflicted with my whole life. And another reason that I looked up to this man, because despite being insane and despite being cynical, people still follow him, right? But he backslid. And now he is so lost in darkness that the man went from having all of those things to living in his mom's basement, age 41, no prospects, no hope on the horizon, and no doubt in no mind frame to be able to really be able to enjoy anything. And that is a cursed existence that really we shouldn't wish on anyone except the most horrible people. Maybe Hitler would have deserved it. But, and speaking of butts, a little butt munch action, and the duality of nature, right? Here I am talking about real shit. Well, we got assholes getting, they getting licked. Yeah. So anyways, so back to Noah Antwire. This guy fell into obscurity. And that's something that made me even think to make this video, because this is something that I just like. The man was someone that I saw so much of myself in. And to see him defeated the way he was is truly a heartbreaking thing. So now let's talk about another person who had a lot, seemingly, right? Based on what society says we should have. Money, stuff, fame, all that, right? Robin Williams, a key player in all of our childhoods. I'm sure he has a special place in all of our hearts. And the majority of his roles that he played in the movies that we grew up on were ones of an uplifting and warm and kind nature. And so I'm sure that's what the majority of us see him as. But this man, his backstory essentially is that he was born into a wealthy family. But because they were a wealthy family, they barely ever had any time for him. And the only way that he was ever able to, you know, get any attention from his parents was by being funny and getting it from his mom in that way. So yes, that is what led him into being the funny, brilliant, talented man we all knew and loved. But it's also what killed him. He spent his whole life feeling like he had to be on, feeling like he had to wear a social mask. And we all feel this way, whether we realize we feel this way or not. And to what degree it may or may not manifest in each of us is going to be different, because we're all different. But I guarantee that we all experience it to a degree. Is that we have to present, or we feel that we have to present, a face to reality, a face to society that people can accept. But all that does is lead to feelings of inadequacy, lead to feelings of misery, lead to feelings of suffering. And a man like Robin Williams is the perfect example of why that is such a toxic thing in our society. Now let's talk about another actor who suffered from a lot of similar depression problems. Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey's alive and well. And Jim Carrey, a lot of people see as a crazy person because of some of the things he says, but if you actually really listen to the man, the majority of what he's saying is true. And he spent the majority of his life consumed by depression. And it was at the point that he was playing the role of Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon that he had a realization. Because he had a mental break. He so badly did not want to be Jim Carrey that he actually slipped into character all the time. Like, when the cameras were off, he was still Andy Kaufman, because being Andy Kaufman, in his perspective, was so much better than being Jim Carrey. And that's when he realized that he'd been playing a part, not just in all of his movies his whole life, but he'd been playing the part of Jim Carrey. He'd been wearing a mask. The irony, of course, being that he starred in The Mask, right? And Crimson Mask is about to get an ass to the face. Oh, nope, he didn't. Got lucky there. But point being is this man realized this, and he was able to overcome it because of that. And unfortunately, Noah Antweiler and Robin Williams were not able to come to this conclusion, and it has led to a man withering away in obscurity and a man's suicide, respectively. And that's something that we really need to consider and to put a laser focus on in society, because if we don't, it's only going to continue to exist unchecked and cause us all these unnecessary negative emotions. When reality is that, you know, we should all just accept each other. So, now I'm going to talk a little bit about why we feel this way. Society wants to put us in a box. And the reason that they want to put us in the box is because, whether you want to like it or not, the rich and powerful want to maintain that wealth and power. And the reason for that isn't even like they're sitting there twiddling their fingers like Mr. Burns going, "Wah ha 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 ha." It's simply just because we are an animal. And animals have certain instinctual behaviors that we've evolved in order to survive. One of those is hoarding resources, okay? So, humans are an animal, and we have that instinctual behavior. We are no more special than a squirrel hiding nuts for winter. But the difference between us and a squirrel is that because we are such an intelligent being, we are able to not only impact our environment, but each other to a much, much larger degree, to where we have, you know, issues in our society like the 1%, which is very, very, very real. So we're programmed to stay in this box, and the things that we're taught are things that are going to keep us subservient, things that are going to keep us fixated on hating each other, you know, the dual political party thing. That doesn't exist because, you know, the liberals are not promoting abortions not being illegal because they care. They're promoting that because they know they can use that as a platform to get votes. Just like the conservatives, really, and I'm talking about politicians here, not your, no, Joe Anacletus conservative or you know, Toby the leftist. I'm talking about the politicians. And these politicians mostly come from already successful families, and again, that's for a reason, is that it makes it easier for them to keep us under control, because if we're under control, if we're fighting each other, then that means that we're not thinking about the ways that they are committing injustices towards us. We're not looking at them. And so as a result, they program all these supposed ways we need to think, feel, and act in order to maintain that status quo, and in order to essentially keep us, because all we really are in the eyes of them is two numbers. First number, how much money you're spending. Second number, how much labor, how much time of labor they can get out of you, right? So if we're kept ignorant by media, if we're kept ignorant by all these various things, including, say, you know, someone who's born a homosexual, well, they probably, at least at some point in their life, experience feelings of inadequacy, suffering, because society told them from a young age that, well, if you feel this way, that means you're weird, and that leads to feelings of inadequacy. And that is an extreme example. There's small examples in ways that this happens to people all the time too, so many that we don't see. Society insults you in ways that you don't even realize, and all these words that I'm saying are words that a lot of people don't necessarily want to hear. But the thing is if we keep our eyes closed, we never open them, then we'll always be cast in darkness. And the character Prophet Gray is essentially a man that would preach that. But rather than reach the enlightened state that Jim Carrey did, he instead went down the route that Spoonie did, doubled down on being a cynical bastard, you know. So in that aspect, he's not like me. But in what he would promo about, it's all stuff that's true. It's painful truth, but people don't like hearing that painful truth because it takes them out of that nice little comfort zone bubble that is, again, programmed into us to achieve the result of us spending as much money as possible and us spending as much of our time as possible. And time is your most valuable resource. Do not let anyone tell you any different. We only have so much of it. We don't even know how much we have. And we trade it for things all the time. We trade it for money. We trade it for stuff. We trade it for social status. We trade it for all these various things that society tells us that we should or should not have. You know, all these various things that if we don't have, we'll feel some sense of inadequacy, unnecessarily so. Because you might be born into a position where something like that is almost unattainable. But is it your fault that you were born into that position? Is it your fault you were born into this, or your fault you were born into that? But society would rather you suffer in that and continue to struggle just because it will keep you chasing that carrot on a stick, right? And by chasing that carrot on the stick, you are a better resource, right? So we're boiled down, instead of being human, into just a number. And people wonder why there's so many shootings nowadays. Well, it's not because guns are out of control. America's had the same gun laws forever, pretty much. The reason is because before we had a higher standard of living. Now we don't. The standard of living is much lower in this country than it has been in a long time, and as a result, people are suffering, they're lashing out. And these mental illnesses that people will develop as a result of all these feelings of inadequacy society forces on them, that traps them with, well, then they'll act out. So we have all these various things coming to a head in society, but it's just so much easier for a politician to lobby for gun control because it would get them half of the votes. They don't care that, you know, some kid just went and killed a bunch of other kids. These people spend the majority of their lives never having to deal with consequence or suffering of any kind, and an unfortunate problem is that people tend to not learn important life lessons unless they go through those things. And these are the people that we're trusting in power, the very opposite of the type of people that would have our interests in mind. And mind you, this power structure, not the exact same line of, it's like not like the same families have been in control since the dawn of man, but this structure has been in place as long as we've known of recorded history, right? There's always been these systems of social standard, and it may vary from culture to culture, but if you differ from that standard, then it's going to present you with feelings of inadequacy. And unfortunately, you know, people who are presented with that, and Prophet Gray, of course, gets eliminated with a butt munch. People that are presented with that reality, dang it, that butt munch threw me off my train of thought, guys. Mouth and his desire for booty is just too appealing. And you gotta have a sense of humor, right? We're talking about this heavy stuff. We're watching asses get ate. You know, we're having a good time. So we have to start seeing these things as they are, despite being uncomfortable truths, because if we don't, again, it's going to just cause us feelings of inadequacy, feelings of misery. And we got things so twisted nowadays, we're afraid to speak out, afraid to speak up against injustices, afraid to even uplift each other, because we're worried about what people might think. And again, it comes down to that mask that we feel like we must wear, that we must present in order to be accepted. The mask that I have presented to you guys is no mask. It's me. Here I am talking about heavy shit while we're watching my wrestlers lick buttholes. You know what I mean? This is uncandid jelly skeleton. And that's how we should all be. You gotta let your freak flag fly, no matter what it is. And no matter what society tells you you should be, you shouldn't be, you should think or feel, right? Because all that does is lead to shallow, narrow-minded people who are suffering. All of these are traits that are not good. And if we continue to ignore them, not talk about them, and trivialize them, then the human race is only going to slip further into darkness, further into madness, right? And let me give you an example. We're all from the 90s. Probably, I would imagine most of us, right? Most wrestling fans like us, we were around during that time. But let's just say you're not, whatever. But for sake of argument, us 90s kids. We grew up in the Attitude Era, offensive, shock value, all these various things, and we aren't bothered by it, right? It's just something that we see as entertaining, funny. It is what it is. But I got banned, a Facebook ban, 6 days, for making a dark joke on a dark humor group where someone was virtue signaling about guns killing people, right? You know, the whole guns don't kill people, people kill people, and that whole argument. So they had posted a picture of somebody karate chopping a tomato. And, you know, regardless of your political viewpoint, you got to be able to see a little humor in life. So I simply commented, you're right. We shouldn't be shooting each other. We should be karate chopping each other to death, right? And anyone with a sense of humor, you know, like, that would be something that anybody in the 90s, no one would bat an eye at. Got the Facebook ban for it. Meanwhile, 4 days ago, I broke up a cyberbullying ring in a Simpsons group where these members were en masse, I would imagine, probably by the hundreds, messaging all these various businesses that that had a name that any way resembled anything that had been said in The Simpsons ever, right? That's a big spectrum. Remember the episode of South Park? Simpsons did it. You know what I mean? So people, they're harassing and posting these screenshots of harassment, and it gets to the point where finally a screenshot is shared where the person has clearly been being harassed nonstop and is just fed up with it. And I'm like, guys, like, this isn't cool, right? And like I said, like, I make dark jokes. I'm a dark humor group. I'm from the 90s. You know what I mean? Like, all this stuff that's offensive is fine, because, like, a dark joke hurts nobody. Who is hurt by a simple joke about comparing people to tomatoes with the karate chopping? You know what I mean? Nobody. But you know what does cause harm? People who are hired to do a job to help manage a page, and then someone making their job miserable because they think it's fun. My fun, my happiness is more important than yours, so screw you, I'm going to make you suffer. So probably for the first and only time in my life, I reported a Facebook group for bullying and harassment. And out of the thousands of people on that group, I was the only one who cared enough and had enough vision outside of this bubble that people are programmed into to constantly seek self-reward, to constantly seek attention, to see that what they were doing was wrong. And thankfully, Facebook saw that, and now they can't make those posts anymore, and therefore saving all these people from the misery of constantly having to deal with who knows how long before they would have gotten bored, you know, of harassing these people. And based on the trend of just, this has a name that's similar to something in The Simpsons, and The Simpsons has basically probably included almost every word in the dictionary at this point. Who knows how far it would have gone left unchecked. And that's the thing, is we have to open our mouths. We can't leave these things unchecked. And the same thing applies to uplifting people. We have to uplift people. We can't be afraid to do that, because you never know. Going back to what I was talking about, Robin Williams, Spoonie, even Jim Carrey, myself, as a perfect example. I have led a life that you could say is worse than all three of those men, by quite a wide margin. So, the positive words that I've received from some of the members of the community, the comments, the likes, but certain members of the community that have reached out to me to express positivity towards me, to attempt to uplift me. That's so important. You guys have no idea how much you have done for me, somebody who has been mentally defeated my whole life, to be able to see something in me. You know, to see that I can create something that's worthwhile. And that's why I want to use it as a platform, you know, to not only spread joy, you know, through my comedy and DVPW, but to also spread awareness. Because if you become aware of these things, any feelings of inadequacy you might feel about something that you don't have can fade away. Because I realized that a lot of us spend our whole lives grieving, and that's why we're suffering. We're grieving over these things that we feel like we should or shouldn't have. And we never get through those stages of grief. We can never get to that stage of acceptance. But despite my life being worse than all three of these men's, I have come to that conclusion, much like how Jim Carrey reached his personal conclusion about life that allowed him to reach a stage of enlightenment where he can shed that gremlin that was on his back his whole life, telling him that he needs to be Jim Carrey, the face he puts on. That led to all his feelings of inadequacy. And now the man exists in a state of enlightenment and, no doubt, splendor compared to what he was experiencing before. And society presents so many things to fool us, be it ways to politicians manipulate us, but it's not just limited to things like that. It's every facet of life. Take the WWE 2K games, for example. The entire reason I'm even here in Fire Pro is because 2K22 keeps creating bugs that keep breaking the character creation, and obviously character creation is my favorite thing. So the customer service for 2K22 is completely worthless. It's a Potemkin village, and what a Potemkin village is it's a facade, something that's presented to you that's an untruth to mask. Again, we're coming down to masks. Masks are lies. To mask the grim reality of what is actually behind that. It's like a cardboard set on a TV show. It's just, on an old western, a bunch of flat buildings. But if you just step to the side and look from the side, it's just a bunch of wooden planks held up by, some wedges. It's not an actual building. That is what we experience. And that 2K service, they literally are. The customer service is incapable of contacting the developers at all. They cannot talk to the developers. They cannot find out if the developers know a bug exists, and they cannot report a bug. So in other words, their literal only purpose for existence is to trick you, to pull the wool over your eyes, and deceive you into thinking that they care. Just like how the government pulls the wool over your eyes with the various things they promote, like the left with their pro-abortion, and the right with their pro-guns. It's a false reality they're presenting to you, and you have to see all of this as it is. You have to step outside that bubble and be able to see outside of it, because if you don't, then you're again just going to be experiencing feelings of inadequacy, because once you realize that all of this is a lie, then you can realize your true self, who you really are, unhindered by what society tells you that you should be. You feel guilty that you don't have this. You feel sad or inadequate or mad because you're this way, and society makes you feel like you should be that way. Fuck society. What is that doing for you? What is that doing for you other than causing you problems? And all of these systems put into place, I could go on endlessly. Mediocrity. We've been slowly conditioned to accept mediocrity. And as a result, our media is at an all-time low of quality, and people don't care. In fact, they'll go out of their way to defend it. 2K22, they'll go out of their way to defend that game. When I point out these things, people don't want to listen, because going outside that bubble of comfort that's been programmed into them by, again, all these systems put into place is so incredibly painful. But that allows them to be victimized by these companies completely consequence-free. And again, it comes down to opening your mouth, and if enough of us would, then they would have no choice but to fix it. But because, unfortunately, it's a vocal minority, and this applies to not just video games, this is literally everything in life. Because it's a vocal minority, even though that minority is correct, and the evidence is plentiful and tangible on why, nothing's going to change. Because, like with those rich people, if you never experience any form of suffering or punishment for your bad deeds, well, chances are you're never going to understand that those are wrong. And that is an unfortunate nature of humanity. Does that mean we're horrible to our core? No. It just means that we're a flawed being with animal instincts, but we have the ability to surpass those. We have the ability to look outside the bubble, outside of ourselves, outside of what we're told about ourselves, who we should be. Be who you are. If you want to animate a move where a guy's getting his butt ate and post it on Fire Pro Group, do it. I did it. Got more likes on that than anyone. There was a hesitation in my mind on whether or not you guys would reject me for posting something like that, but instead you embraced me for it. I choose to be who I am, Jelly Skeleton, no mask. My real name, Christopher Tiplady. Yes, Christopher Tiplady. My real name is just as weird as my fake name. I just like my fake name. That's not a mask. Here I am, real, threadbare. And one of the group members, one of the ones that went out of their way to uplift me, told me, because we've had some discussions about a lot of things, and including Movecraft, and I explained to him how I view it and what my thought processes are when I'm doing it, and he told me that what he thinks the reason that I'm that way is that most people see a stick figure, but I see flesh and bones. Most people only read every other word, but I've read the whole book. And that is not because I'm special, or better, or smarter, or anything else above anyone. It's just simply due to the fact that the circumstances of my life have led me to being able to look outside that bubble that's been programmed into me more easily than others can. But, like I've said in my past video, everyone has potential in one way or another. You have potential to expand your mind, to open